Okay, so we will talk about this debate from the definition from the point of view of all religions, but we will also explain why it's specifically relevant to minorities. So by saying that we don't want people of minority religions to publicly display expressions of faith, then we just mean any type of dressing, head dressing, marker that's purpose is to declare I am of this religion, which means religious accessories and not necessarily cultural accessories. By minority religions, we of course mean religions that are minority in the state that we are talking about. So I will explain Gov's position from 2 points. First of all, why it will give these people from minority religions easier assimilation into culture, and why these outward expressions of faith are only an obstacle to fit into their current society. And second of all, of why we don't want any public displays of faith, why public displays of faith have an origin whose whole purpose was to segregate their religions and define their religion in relation to people outside the religion, and why by discouraging public displays of faith, discouragement that comes specifically from the leaders of said religion, then we think that we can both create a better public sphere and also create a better, more healthier approach to religion in itself. So to the first point, easier assimilation into culture. People in minority faiths have much trouble being part of their society. They mostly come from secluded communities, which means that they have less in common with most of the populations. Now these secluded communities can be more similar to, say, Orthodox Jews in New York, for example, who lived there historically for a very long time, but because they are so different that they choose to live in these communities over a long period of time. Or it can be more like Muslims in Europe, which because they have immigrated there, then it is far, far easier for them to live one with each other and not assimilate into society, and therefore, though newcomers to the area, they still live in seclusion. Now, the thing is that when people live in secluded communities, or they just immigrate from other countries, then they have massive cultural differences, they have massive religious differences, and in the case of immigration, they also have a larger culture barrier and language barrier, where they find it much harder to fit in with current society. And also, many of them face historic hate and racism, with be it Jews in Europe with anti-Semitism, or Muslims with the current wave of hate towards immigrants. Now, in a moment, because of all this segregation and because of this historic hate, then these people have faced systemic discrimination in society. It comes both with adult people of these communities, where they have difficulty finding work because they face oppression and discrimination. More importantly, it comes with children of these communities, where if they come from an openly different culture, where they come, where they come from an openly different culture, an openly different religion, then they find it harder to fit in school. Now, when these people find it far, far harder to fit in, when these children don't fit in schools, then they find it harder to feel a part of the culture of this country. If these people remove any outward declarations of religion, which means that in the case of secluded communities, which are part of the country, then it will be, for example, Jews who no longer wear yarmulkes, then they will find it much easier to find work, children will be less picked on in school, and therefore over time they will find it easier to blend into the country. And in the case of newer immigrants with a culture and religious barrier, then removing a single of these barriers, the religious one, will help to remove the hate part of the oppression towards them, and only leave the cultural barriers, the misunderstanding, and then people will be more willed to help them when they don't have earlier negative attitudes toward them just because of their faith. Therefore, them not outwardly displaying their faith will far, far more help them to blend in. Yes, opening up.
Sexual assault happens disproportionately more towards women. Should all women dress more conservatively?
Wait, can you repeat that?
Sexual assault happens disproportionately more against women. Should all women dress more conservatively?
No, but I'll reach that in the second point of why outward declarations of faith are not something that should be encouraged in any ways, regardless of the positive impact. Now, why don't we want public displays of faith? Religion is something that is relevant in two places. First of all, in the person themselves, which means they, in regards to their own values or their gods, if they have any. And second of all, in community, about the religious community, about how these people interact with each other. Now, personal religion exists no matter what the person wears, which means if a religion has values, then the person can commit to the values, can take the take care of the values, can look after the values with themselves no matter what they wear. So therefore the personal aspect of religion will exist no matter what they wear. Second of all, in the community, people in religious communities congregate in places dedicated to that. For example, Jews in synagogues, Christians in churches, and so forth, which means that religious communities still happen in any case. People with the same religion, for example, a group of 50 Jews in a synagogue, don't need any outward religious markers for them to know that they are Jewish, and they don't need any of these markers to create the Jewish community between themselves. So why do people actually wear outward expression of religion? Historically, the reason that outward expression of religions exist in the first place is to display faith, to differentiate them from other faiths. It means when a person wears an outward declaration of faith, they say, I am of this religion and you are not. It is something that's purpose is to differentiate them from the other. Why is that? It's because historically it was very beneficial for religious leaders to keep a divide. Second half.
But what happened in the past is not important. The question is, what will happen to these people today once they remove these?
Yeah, I'm talking about the present in a moment. Now, first of all, the only reason, the origin of this thing is because religious leaders found it easy to separate between the followers of the religion and others, but today that is no longer relevant. Today, we say that people should not think of their religion by how it is defined by other people. People need to think of their religion as something that stands in itself, something that has value in itself, and we don't want, for example, Jews to think of their religion as people who wear yarmulkes and people who don't wear yarmulkes. Now, this isn't any form of repression because we're not forcing anybody to do things. We would say it is good if the religious leaders try to encourage this themselves, because then that change that we want can come from the religion in itself. Lilach will talk about that more. But in addition to that, we also want a declaration that your religion is not defined by its relationship to non-believers, and therefore it should not be relevant, for example, in the public sphere. Outward declarations of religion in the public sphere. We want people to have a healthier approach towards religion. We want them to think of religion as it relates to them. Lilach will also talk about how it will help alleviate bigotry, and specifically to religious leaders. We're glad to propose. Thank you.
Woo!